gentlemen, I am not Ven Stone. But this is, in fact, Linux Weekly Daily Wednesdays. Yes, you didn't tune into the wrong show. It's just Ven is in spirit with us today. But, well, I'll sort of be running the show, so expect a train wreck. This week, we are going to be talking about Lenovo backing down from their RAID decision. I guess they realized they kind of do need that Linux compliance, and Fedora brings proper Prime support. Tautology. But only in version 25.
Precursor's successor opens the source, so you can now draw penises with your friends on the internet. And in the not-too-distant future, Mozilla rips out some Firefox components. La la la.
And Apple just released some new hardware. And not surprisingly, System 76 needs to upgrade their servers to keep up with that. So are you tired of having a stable server? Well, we'll explain how to install Arch on your VPS.
That's right. I'm going to have to stop you right there. It's pronounced Arch. But before we go off on that tangent, let's get on to it. So what's this about Precursor?
So collaborating with people on the internet is hard. I mean, we all know it. We have, and it could not be done without the help of collaborative software, where we can all work together on a single document. Like the show notes that you can subscribe to on our Patreon for $2.50 a show, plugging our wares. But anyways, one of the more prolific ones out there, Precursor, has decided to open source their web-based whiteboard software. So it's for prototyping, it's for drawing. They have a bunch of tools to draw lines and all sorts of things. I screwed around with it for a little bit, and basically it just devolved to what I did when I first got into Tilt Brush with the HTC 5 demo, and just started drawing penises, because that's all that came to mind. But this is Google Docs style whiteboard, and now you can roll your own. If you want to check it out, it's on GitHub. The link to it is in the story in our show notes. So you're going to have to do some clicking. This isn't for Onyx, where it all leads back to Linux Gamecast. So...
Yeah, it seems to be a quite neat web app, useful to draw mock-ups of websites and mobile apps, so things like that, but in a collaborative manner. But yeah, I mean, it's really great that they open source their product, but then I went to their GitHub page, and the source code was in Clojure scripts. So it's basically Lisp. So after that, I closed the page really quickly and never opened it again. I mean, it's also using React, which I'm not really a fan of. So...
Would you say you have a reactionary stance on it?
Yeah.
A very exploding one at that. But Precursor, as a project for a small company who's looking to prototype something, is great. It's really good, and, you know, letting people spin their own, since it's now open source, it removes the privacy concerns with using stuff like Google Docs. Oh, but Google knows everything. Google already knows everything about you. Come on.
It's also a little better than Google Draw for collaborative.
Yeah, Google Draw is not really
honestly, I can tell you with some degree of certainty that this tool would be of monumental use when we're recording the Portal episodes, Ven and I.
So, Jordan,
draw something out and show it to him.
So, Jordan, considering how well Google Doc works on Firefox, how do you think it would work on an entirely new Firefox engine?
Who knows? The guys at Quantum do. No, we're not talking about a terrible James Bond movie. It's just really, really bad. But anyways, this is Project Quantum from Mozilla. And some of the Firefox components, if you've been following the project for a while, are starting to be a little long in the tooth. So the plan is to rip out Gecko and replace components of it with Tom Servo components in chunks. So they have a different compositor, renderer, and document object model. This is all going to be done in Rust for the most part, and there's going to be some C++ glue code to tie it into the rest of Firefox, which is still done in the C++ and the JavaScripts. theoretically, this should result in some better performance because they're starting to render pages out like you would a game engine as opposed to just a flat web page, because web pages have become a lot more than that these days. Dynamic CSS and JavaScript makes the fact they're streaming applications. So by being able to run concurrently on more threads on more CPUs, this should improve performance significantly, and they're also changing how frames work as well, using their compositor, where everything is now a shared user space thread as opposed to a separate process. So it's interesting. This could result in some interesting performance gains, but it's still being worked on. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it seems to be like a mix between, well, it seems to be the transition between Gecko and Servo. So yeah, I mean, it's really good work, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I do hope it puts an end to the whole Chrome and WebKit monopoly we're seeing here, especially like with Electron apps and all that stuff. It doesn't change the fact that Rust is only used by Mozilla at this point.
Yeah, and we've all seen how well monopolies do in the browser space when you have a particularly dominant browser. Firefox was a victim, quote unquote, of that back in the day when it was either Firefox or Safari, which was using the Trident engine, which was using the same engine as
Internet Explorer was the Trident engine,
Yeah.
buddy. Correct you there.
Yeah, no, but the original Safari was also on the Trident engine. So,
Was it?
like back in the day,
HTML.
Did they buy that off Microsoft? I'm gonna need a fact check on that, but
they licensed it, yes. But yeah,
Speaking
the Quantum engine, Firefox or Mozilla did release the alpha back in June. And I remember trying it. At first, I was using Fedora, and it didn't work because it was compiled against an old version of libSSL. So I had to find the old version of libSSL and link it against that. And it didn't exactly sell me on it because it took a long time to render even a simple web page, and YouTube was basically unusable at any resolution above 144p, not 1440, 144. Yeah.
But this is a year later though, so there's going to be a lot of polish and a lot of testing put into this as well. But I gotta agree with Strider here. The WebKit monopoly is really, really bad. We need some diversification in this field because we all know it happened when Internet Explorer was the only option.
Oh yeah. So Strider, what's this about Arch?
Oh yeah, about Arch. So I don't know, what do you guys run on your server? I mean, I run Ubuntu server. I'm quite happy with it. It has a low maintenance and quite stable. But some people would like to run Arch on their server. I don't why.
Strider,
I don't
it's
exactly know.
Arch. You gotta.
Arch, yes. Well, this blog post on linuxbabe.com will tell you how using VNC you can install Arch on your VPS server, like in a few simple steps. I mean, it's not as simple as installing like the pre-configured like Debian or Ubuntu servers, but it's not that complicated. It's just a couple steps to go through. And basically you download an ISO, you boot your KVM virtual machine into the VNC client, and then you go through the regular Arch install. And there you have it, your Arch server, which hopefully won't crash. That's not sure.
And that's the thing. This is kind of dependent on your VPS provider. Being a KVM-based one, which they're the one I use. Linode is KVM-based, but they also need to open VNC. And if you have VNC open to the public internet, you're doing it wrong. But yeah, they say this is useful if your hosting provider doesn't offer an Arch Linux one-click install. Someone needs to pull up that screenshot that Ben had where they're talking about that kernel patch issue. And that one user's like, well, I'm a happy Arch Linux user here. Everything's good over here.
And he was downvoted to high hell. But here at Linux Weekly Daily Wednesdays. We don't really have upvotes and downvotes unless you count the YouTube thingies, but we don't.
We have
And
shares. That's
the
what we
only
have.
thing we actually count are the amount of people supporting us, throwing money at our faces. You can do so by going to linuxgamecast/support the chosen, and you get a multitude of different ways you can support us, including ways which will not cost you a single cent, which is the Amazon affiliate links. You can also give us a direct donation through PayPal, or our most favorite of all donation campaigns, Patreon. Yes, patreon.com/LinuxGamecast. Jordan, what's it all about?
It's about subscribing to us, value for value, because you can put down anywhere from 5 cents to any amount you want. I'm going to throw out a number there. $100 an episode sounds pretty good, right?
Insanity.
I think you crafty consumers think that our entertainment is worth $100 an episode, don't you? Wink, nudge, nudge. I mean, if it gets us closer to that log cabin Patreon goal, the better, right? But yeah, you can sign up for patreon.com. There's some back rewards. Buck a show gets you access to a bunch of videos early. $2.50 a show gets you access to show notes. And if you want to join the illustrious ranks of Chris Fisher and Empty, you can sign up for the 666 level, which means that Chicago does in fact kick ass. We got a new Portal 2 up there. We got a live stream RSS feed. And for you crazy people who love 5 hours of Linux Gamecast, you just want more of it in your face, we offer the full stream. The full 5-hour Twitch stream. It's miserable. If you can slog through the entire thing, you win a bite-sized Snickers. But you can only get it.
Van actually left this in the show notes. Do you want an RSS feed for the whole 5-hour thing so you can have it on your favorite podcatcher? If you do, let us know, because for all intents and purposes, it is a podcast, technically speaking, and with 300. Yeah, according to Ven's notes here, we're getting like 300 plus downloads a week just in audio downloads. So yeah, if you want, let us know. All right. So with that out of the way, let's stop shilling.
Get in touch with us as well.
Yep.
If you back us.
Let's stop shilling and talk more about ourselves.
Right. Well, you see some illiterate jerkbag stuck up some sort of video on some shitty streaming service about how to set up some stupid virtual webcam. You can check that out at that retard's website, linuxgamecast.com. But yeah, no, this is how to create a virtual webcam on Linux. Is this the one that I participated in? I don't recall. But you can, it's about how to download a kernel module, install it, use some FFmpeg to bypass some of the limitations of screen sharing software under Linux. If you've been using Google Hangouts or Jitsi Rainbow Bridge or even Skype Video, you know that sometimes the screen sharing solution implemented within just doesn't quite cut it. So This is a good way to basically hijack a webcam slot and stream your desktop over the webcam interface as opposed to the screen share interface.
Yeah, and we can actually see the biggest difference of that. Well, you guys can't see it, but we can on the back end as we're recording this, because Ven sends us the return video through the Hangouts. And if he was just doing like regular screen sharing capture, it would be at like 2 frames a second, 5 at most. And if the Hangouts think, because it's an artificial limitation at the part of Google and the other people who do that, if it thinks that it's an actual webcam, then it's like, oh, okay, so I'm going to give you the full burps as they were.
Yeah, it's nice to have an updated guide for that in 2016, because I used to do that many years ago, and I think it was with the V4L1. So that was the old API for the Linux webcam that was in the kernel. So this is like up to date. It will work on any recent Linux distribution. So that's cool. One thing I miss here is that neat little program called EffectTV, which will let you apply a bunch of real-time effects to your webcam. And I'm going to give it a try and try to port this to V4L2, and I can do the whole show with the Predator effects when I've done that.
All right. So you may remember
a few. Needs to look more like a Predator. Yeah.
You may remember a few weeks ago when there was news and a whole big snafu about Lenovo not allowing people to install Linux on their laptops, specifically the Yoga Y900.
Series.
Yeah, the Yoga Y900, which was, it wasn't so much that they didn't allow people to install Linux, is because Linux didn't support the firmware RAID that they were using with the Intel chipset and whatever storage configuration they happen to have
Intel Rapid Storage is what they call it.
Yep. And basically, firmware RAIDs, if you've been a Linux user for a while, you're lucky if whatever chipset you have on your motherboard is going to set up a RAID that the system can even see it, let alone install to it. So the fine folks at Lenovo decided, thankfully, not to double down on stupid, and they released a patch for their BIOS, which unlocks the RAID setting so you can revert the SATA options back to AHCI. You know, basic legacy support is always nice. And while, okay, every now and again, I like to play devil's advocate, and I can see that locking people to that stupid RAID would have limited the variance options in that particular Yoga model when Intel or Lenovo or Microsoft themselves could optimize it. It would. But this is already a pretty niche machine, as it were, and if you're limiting the niche within the niche, like I don't know, trying to run Linux on it, it's going to hurt more than it helps.
Well, even then, like, why even ship it in a RAID configuration by default? I don't think that this laptop is coming with multiple drives installed, so that doesn't really make much sense, especially for the Yoga series, which is not their professional line, this is more their consumer grade thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, good old firmware RAID, just making people go, why? Since 1992 or whatever the hell it was actually invented. But yeah, there are a lot of people calling malice about this, and I think we got to introduce you all to a concept called Hanlon's razor, which states, never attribute to malice what you could equally attribute to stupidity. I think someone in Lenovo marketing or engineering said, oh, no one's going to be installing other operating systems on this computer, and we need this driver for whatever silly reason in case someone's buying a laptop at their Best Buy and filling it to the brim with solid-state drives, because that's what people do with laptops, don't you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they were blaming the Linux developers for not providing drivers for this RAID, which I'm sure they didn't provide specification for it. So, no.
Oh, no, and, this is Intel proprietary through and through.
Yeah. And the Lenovo guys weren't too happy about shipping the BIOS update without the RAID configuration, because they said it was suboptimal to run it without the RAID.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
what is suboptimal?
I've never run the RAID on my SSD, and I'm doing just fine. So I don't think it's suboptimal to do that.
Well,
I don't know.
You take the one solid state drive in there, and then you chop it in half, and then you RAID it with itself.
Yes, you RAID it on itself. But, you know, speaking of redundant things, there was that little display server that Ubuntu suggested a while back called Mirror, and they actually shipped it with Ubuntu Phone. And Martin Wimpress, the person who is currently in charge of Unity 8 and the Ubuntu Mate spin, as it were, has created a teeny tiny script that lets you record and encode mirror captures on your Linux box. Say if you're using Ubuntu 16.10 and you are using Unity 8, you can record your desktop session now, and or even if you have like a phone or one of those tablets that ship with Ubuntu Mobile, you can use that for that as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I've looked at the scripts a little bit, and apparently with you can have a system running Mirror, which doesn't have either grep, cut, sed, or a bunch of like very basic Linux utilities. I mean, this is just plain weird. I wouldn't.
You can run Ubuntu with a shocking lack of mostly core Unix components, which is, I'm not even sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's just
yeah.
I think I have the minimal Ubuntu setup in a VM to test for things. And I think even that has like these tools like grep, and I mean, who wouldn't have grep?
Well,
Seriously.
I mean, in Fedora, there's like this package called GNU Core Utils that just has like this basic set of functions that you need to like have Bash work.
I guess there's probably more of a sanity check than anything, or maybe like Ubuntu Phone, for the sake of having the lowest possible footprint, they don't include those.
I don't know. I'll have to check.
How does this work? Because if it's using the EGL handling, copying data from context is kind of tricky. So Strider, you're the same person as far as I'm concerned. What you have in the show notes is it creates like a temporary file to stream
Creates
the output to and then records it via
file, so it's like a sort of pipe file. And
so it actually does use a Unix pipe. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, and it's between mirror screencast, which does the mirror recording and outputs it in whatever format. And this goes into a pipe, and FFmpeg grabs the output from that pipe and encodes it into MP4 with X264. And
so what you're saying is if you want evidence on film that Mir just completely breaks your system, this is the way to do it.
Yes. You have to use Mir.
All right.
You know, speaking of killing your performance, some Mesa guys have done the opposite, haven't they?
Yep. So, Mr. Marek Olsak, or Marek Olak, as that would be the correct pronunciation since he's Polish. My bad. Sorry about that. He has created a patch set to enable threading on the Mesa drivers, which is kind of amazing because for anyone who's used an Intel laptop or even an AMD laptop with an APU, or a desktop card for that matter, with the open source drivers, you'll notice that the performance isn't very good. Now, with this, it will allow certain GL calls to be split between threads. And there was actually a very good example, which is the very first link on that page, which, according to Marek, Borderlands 2 is 70% faster with Mesa underscore GL threads set to equals true, which is insane, mind-boggling.
Well, we were seeing massive performance bumps like that with those early OpenGL patches for like Team Fortress back in the day, when they're like, oh yeah, we figured this out. Now TF2 actually runs at 30 frames a second as opposed to 2. But it's a good step in the right direction, and this affects any of the Gallium-based drivers in Mesa, which is both the Intel and the Radeon one, but I don't think it actually supports.
No, it's not the Intel, it's the NVIDIA, Nuvo and Radeon
are
and
both
R600.
Gallium. I thought Nuvo.
Yeah,
was
no,
using
Intel has i965. That's its own separate thing.
Right, no. Well, I was under the impression that Gallium didn't, or Radeon was the only one using Gallium.
Yeah, no, it's Nuvo as well.
Anyways, it's a good step in the right direction because Mesa, as we've covered recently in recent episodes, is more or less feature complete now in terms of OpenGL support. So getting that speed up there is good. Creates a better out-of-the-box experience. Also, I'd like to point out that the person who is on this commit has an AMD.com email address. So I'm glad to see that someone at AMD is working on their drivers.
That's really good, yeah. I like also like the commit message from this patch, which is mushrooms. And yeah, I mean, it's making really good progress, and they're shipping Mesa with full OpenGL 4.5. The performance is getting better, and who knows? I mean, maybe in the near future, Radeon cards will get to the point where they will perform just as good as NVIDIA cards. And that day, we will see a bunch of GTX cards on eBay because, I mean, including me, I'd rather have open source drivers rather than the closed source.
I don't know. Given this next story, that kind of wish might be a bit of a pipe dream, wouldn't it be?
Indeed, and might as well go for it. So, Fedora 25, according to Christian Scholar,
Schaller,
That I don't.
whatever.
Schaller, yeah. All right. So according to him, Fedora Workstation 25 will have proper support for NVIDIA Prime or even Nouveau Prime if you're using a graphics card which is compliant with the Nouveau drivers. Now, the way that this works, and it's in big part due to the fact that NVIDIA a couple of months ago decided to introduce the GL vendor neutral dispatch, which along with the vendor neutral driver support, allows for Mesa and the NVIDIA proprietary drivers to be installed at the same time. And if you have a laptop with Optimus, you can render something on the integrated Intel GPU and then pass it on to a display which is connected to the NVIDIA GPU. And this was the biggest thing, because having something rendered on one of the GPUs and then passing it to a display which was connected to the other GPU, like say if you were trying to play a game and you didn't have an external display, you wanted to render it just on the laptop's own LCD. That was a problem, and it caused a number of issues, because even though it was rendered on the NVIDIA GPU, it would have to go through the Intel GPU and then to the screen. So this will hopefully ameliorate that situation with a Fedora 25. You can also do this. Go
Well, I just like to say, as someone who has a whack ton of experience dealing with this nightmare fuel, having set this up on my own laptop on Fedora 23, actually, it's going to be nice to see some out of the box support for this, because there's definitely some screwiness going on with getting Prime working under Linux with just the NVIDIA proprietary drivers. Not most of all, the fact that you basically have to remove your ability to do any OpenGL stuff on the Intel IGP, because all the NVIDIA OpenGL libraries will overwrite the symlinks for the standard Mesa OpenGL libraries. In addition, it's good to see Fedora actually taking a step forward with this, because switchable graphics on Linux has been just a nightmare. I've given the instructions that worked for me to someone else who has a very similar laptop, and he was unable to get that up and running, which is problematic. But this also has some upsides with Wayland as well.
Indeed. From Fedora 25 and up, you'll be able to use the proprietary NVIDIA drivers with the base system, the workstation release anyway. But if you want to use hybrid graphics with Wayland, you'll have to wait for them to be available natively in Fedora 26, supposedly.
Well, it's not quite that. It's Wayland applications will work with the NVIDIA blob driver as a Fedora 25. The issue then becomes if you're using the NVIDIA blob driver, then it's going to insist on becoming the primary driver. And so if you want to be using an Intel card or whatnot, you're going to have to, or the Nouveau drivers, you're going to have to deal with that. But in addition, the X Wayland support, the compatibility layer between X and Wayland, is not implemented 100% for the blob driver. Therefore, anything that needs to fall back on X won't work with the blob driver, but anything using, say, SDL for window drawing will work fine out of the box in Wayland, which is interesting.
Yep. Strider?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is some very solid work from both NVIDIA and Fedora. That it's really cool that they've been working together on that. And yeah, they've improved a bunch of points, and it's like all these little improvements we've been seeing in the past few months, such as GLVND and GLES support for the Wayland, that's coming together. And we're seeing all these improvements at last coming to use. So it's really cool that it's coming from Fedora, because I've tried Fedora in the past, and always the weak point was the NVIDIA drivers. And now they've realized that it was their weak point, and they're working on that. And now it's going to be one of the best distros to run Fedora, to run NVIDIA cards on. So that's really cool, and they really have caught up with Ubuntu here.
All right.
one last
Go
thing to
on,
point out,
Jordan.
just because I want to get this out of the way. One of the cool things one of the cool features that might come out of this project is if you can use the Mesa Direct 3D 9-state tracker in conjunction with the NVIDIA Blob driver, that will make Wine users very, very happy.
That would
yeah.
be amazing, but for some reason I don't see that happening. So, Strider, we know that out of the three of us, or the four of us, if we include Ven, you're the one filthy dual booting heathen. So tell us, what is that Apple did this week?
Okay, last week they released a bunch of new MacBook Pro, and it was a disappointment for pretty much everyone. And following the events with the presentation of the hardware that Apple released, System 76, which ships Linux hardware, they had to upgrade their servers because they couldn't keep up with the traffic they were getting. And yeah, that's really good news because Apple releases some disappointing hardware, and suddenly you see an increase in interest in Linux hardware. So that this is really good stuff. Similarly, I've seen the Elementary OS desktop, which has released some blog posts, which is targeted at Mac OS users. It's called Switching for Mac OS, the Basics.
It's calling knowing your project and knowing your audience. I mean, if Elementary OS is going to target anyone, it should be OS X users, yes.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I kind of dislike this notion that Linux should be this. Oh, if you want something that's vaguely OS 10 looking, and you would still want to have all the problems running software that you do on Windows, but on another operating system, you should totally go to Linux. That is a bad reputation for this operating system to accrue, 100%. But I mean, and most of the people who are going to System 76 looking for laptops in the wake of the nightmarish MacBook Pro announcement are going to be developers, not the graphics professionals.
So why do developers hate the new MacBook Pro so much?
16 gigs of RAM hard-coded, which is not that bad. Also, the fact that they got rid of the 3.5 millimeter audio jack, replaced it with a Lightning connector headphone set that does not even work with the new iPhone one. They got rid of the F bar, and there's no escape. Like, there is no more escape button. It's now it's the emoji bar, which Empty points out in the show notes is actually a separate ARM processor running its own operating system based on Apple Watch. So, oh god, that's
But yeah, the beta news article that we will have in the show notes, don't you worry, there'll be a link there. They say that the System 76 does not have Apple's revolutionary touch bar. Revo, what now? Because Razer, Razer, those guys who make the gaming laptops and the other gaming branded stuff, they have had light bar type thing with their touchpads on the Blade laptops for years now. They call it the Razer Switchblade UI. Not to mention that on those same laptops, they even let you customize each individual keyboard key. You can literally do anything, and all things considered, you're about as likely to get the light bar working under Linux as you were with the Razer Switchblade UI. Of course, the Razer Switchblade UI already has a couple of years of community development behind it.
What I hope seeing from this is, I mean, almost every developer, at least here in the US, runs Apple software hardware. So I'm hoping that this will change things. Like maybe in the future that it will increase Linux usage overall.
The main stopgap behind that is you can't actually virtualize OS 10. So if you're going to test your cross-platform application, you need a Mac.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, if you're developing iOS software, then you need a Mac. So that's
all
a problem.
right.
So.
And that about wraps us up for the news, but let's get into some slice of pie.
That's right. And this week in Domestic Terrorism Cast, hi NSA. So one of the interesting things about the droning hobby is the way you control these drones. A lot of them don't use standard radio. A lot of them use your standard 802.11 Wi-Fi radio. But in order to make that as idiot-proof as possible, because mom and pop don't necessarily know how 802.11 authentication works and why you need to use WPA-PSK2 at minimum if you don't want people doing what this article describes how to do. So essentially what's going on is you're setting up something to connect to the drone's Wi-Fi access point that is usually left wide open so that you can issue shutdown commands via Telnet or SSH. And when I start seeing like security lessons via just like hobbyist websites advertising you to use Telnet, it just makes me hurt on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, it's a device that runs an open wireless hotspot. Do you really expect that this device runs SSH? I mean, no, I don't think. So yeah, the only way to connect to that device must be with Telnet.
Why would you even have Telnet open on your freaking drone?
Why would you have an open hotspot to begin with?
And that's the biggest thing here, because these particular drones that they're using, after you've been running them a while, the hotspot will show up to everyone connected to that network, or to anyone who has a wireless enabled device in the surrounding area, and you can just connect and tell that into it and tell it to power off, basically. And this is also an issue. They also give you an example there. You see the girl with the CAN antenna.
It's a dramatic photo right there.
Yeah, you can use that same CAN antenna to send DOF packages to everyone in a network, not just that drone, but other Wi-Fi networks. If you can just so much as get close to the Wi-Fi network, it will send DOF packages to anyone remotely closed in.
Pedro is forgetting his basic network security course that I assume he took in university that states you should be telling people
but
live on the internet.
Only being associated with the AP is enough. You don't even need the authentication, according to them. But they don't actually specify how to do it in this particular article. They only go into the how to do it with the drone specifically.
And of course, as Pedro is alluding to, there are many more sinister things you could do with such a setup, including, let's say, crashing drones into people, taking knives to drones and then crashing them into people, and so on.
Yeah, I like the warning. Be sure that no people or fragile items are below the drone when you're testing. So yeah, this stuff is just...
stand directly beneath it so it crashes into your head. That'll teach you.
This is another one of those really neat Pi projects that we don't actively recommend anyone doing. See, NSA, we're not the devil, as you would.
No, all you're doing is just advertising the possibilities that these young impressionable children who watch the show will then Google search.
Yes. With that out of the way, let's get into some feedback. Yes, we actually have a little bit of feedback. If you'd like to send us your feedback, you can do so. linuxgamecast.com, contact button on the navbar. Leave us a comment on YouTube. Leave us a comment on Patreon. Chances are we're probably going to see it. So, up first this week, we have Nemo. You can use Kpatch yourself, and this is about the live patching thing that Canonical released, allowed people to have only 3 systems running without having to, patch the kernel, without having to reboot. And he says, you can run the Kpatch yourself and test the effects on the live patching kernel on your mission-critical systems all by yourself before you deploy said live patch to said systems that are so mission-critical you're considering live patching in the first place. Or you can have Canonical do all the testing of said kernel patch on every version of Ubuntu on that kernel, and rest easy that you claim to have... Okay, there was a what missing there. Systems with both 0 downtime and no known vulnerabilities. Okay, here's a link to the instructions, and he actually does. That said link will be in the show notes. So yeah, that's good. I guess they have to justify the... What was it? How much money was it for the license if you want to use it in more than 3 seats?
I think it was something like $100.
Yeah.
$70 per month or year. I don't know. I think it was per month. But I'm going to try out the free version of that service because I find it very interesting to have these updates coming automatically without having me install the kernel updates. And not having to reboot because, I mean, I don't want that downtime. And since I'm running containers, if I update the kernel, that will propagate on all my containers, hopefully.
I would say that yes, if you're running the one server that needs to be up 100% of the time, then this is certainly a solution to consider. But I don't know, because if you have a well-designed application, it should run on more than one server and have some form of redundancy in place, so you can reboot systems and not have application impacts. No, nothing about that.
It's just that
Architecture, no solutions like this whatsoever.
Yeah, well, none that Canonical would like you to know about, or otherwise they wouldn't be able to justify having you pay for more than 3 systems.
Well, I mean, this was Oracle's bag too when they were doing this.
Yeah,
except they're shaking you down for more money.
So, Jordan, you are the only native English speaker here right now, so how about you take the second bit of feedback?
Oh, boy. Okay, we had a bit of a discussion about this before we went live. About the sort of stream of consciousness or William S. Burroughs naked lunch-esque hate mail that we get sometimes. This guy's talking about rainbows. This is from Jonathan, and he says, "Hi. The only networking problems I've had on Ubuntu are from Network Manager, part of the bug bombing GNOME squad that now brings us other supremacist ideologies like systemd. Where is the new wireless network? What has happened to DNS response time? Or right, not unmanaged yet. Rainbow Stream is pretty nice. Clear Rainbow Stream and terminal, and when using filters, leave the message history and a scroll back, and having activity notifications for the window works too. Image on term is interesting as a visual filter that I want to replicate in the browser, and I will definitely be trying ALibAR using Terminator for shift control G to clear an activity notification." Okay, so I'm having trouble following this, because first he's talking about networking problems from Network Manager, but then he's bringing up systemd supremacism, segueing onto something about not being able to find a wireless network, complaining about unmanaged something and DNS response time, going on to talk about a command line Twitter client, and then bringing it all back home with some Terminator. So if you're trying to write a new 50s beat art house novel, I congratulate you, because you've succeeded.
I mean, there have been Portuguese poets which managed to be less contrived than that.
And we all know that Portuguese poetry comes in second only to vote on poetry and its quality.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but supremacist ideologies were like systemd. I think we hold a show title here.
That would indeed be a very good show title, but I guess that wraps us up. I am Pedro Mateos. You can find me at unaccounted4 on Twitter, or plus Pedro Mateos on Google+.
I'm Jordan Svung. You can find me advocating for SVC host as the primary init system on Linux at The Burning Fool on Twitter, plus Jordan Svung on Google+.
And you can find me on Twitter at Striker, or on Google+ at Mathieu Commandant.
And that about wraps up one more Linux Weekly Daily Wednesdays, brought to you by Patreon.
And
Bye-bye.
smoking? Did you just turn into Camel Joe there for a second, or the Laramie Cowboy?
Wave to the lovely people. Wave.
You're sort of drifting into